Welcome back to the Act Two podcast, a podcast for the real-life working screenwriter. I'm Tasha Hugh.
And I am Josh Hallman.
And we're Act Two, a network and support group for the everyday working screenwriter. This podcast is just one of the things we do, so thank you for joining us here. We also have a Patreon where you can be a free member. You can be a co-EP member. If you are a co-EP member, which is $10 a month, price of a coffee, which is crazy, you get to do a Q&A session with us once a month where we talk about writing. We learn something new about writing, where we talk about writing in some way. And this month we are talking about characters. So we're going to watch an episode of television and we're going to all collectively think about how is character developed specifically. Don't think about anything else. Just think about character and how it's developed over the course of that pilot. And we are doing that at the end of this month, so look out for the date and the time for that. And if you want to be notified of that immediately, you can join us on our Patreon co-EP. It was pretty cool. Last time we talked just about structure. It's pretty fun.
It's a great conversation to have. Like, where else do you get to have these conversations and nerd out?
I don't know.
You know, I should note, it's been a busy summer. I feel like that we've had some reposts. We had to. It's just been a little crazy. So thank you, everyone, for bearing with us. But here's what I wanted to ask you about this summer. More importantly, summer movie season is coming to an end.
Yeah.
I just want to get a quick gut check on where you've been in your summer movie viewing.
Yeah.
We've had The Odyssey, we've had Spider-Man, we've had Disclosure Day. I can't even remember what else has been in between. So where are you? Are you caught up? Have you seen everything?
No.
Okay, great.
I did my best. I really did. But as Josh is saying, our summers have been pretty bonkers in terms of both work and family obligations that have just wrecked us. But I think the end is in sight for me a little bit. And I'm seeing we had to cancel the Odyssey. We had to cancel our Spider-Man tickets. So they have been rescheduled. We even have our Doomsday tickets at this point. Like we're so ready to get back in the game. So yeah, by the time we next speak, I will have seen both the Odyssey and Spider-Man.
Okay, I'm excited to talk to you about The Odyssey. Are you seeing it on IMAX?
Of course, Josh Hallman.
Okay. You know I did not, right?
You did end up not seeing it in IMAX.
I just want to be clear. I was going to Wisconsin. This is a few weeks ago. And I thought to myself, if I do not see The Odyssey, which, by the way, tickets were sold out everywhere. Like, every big screen you could possibly imagine in Los Angeles was sold out. There's nothing. The 2 a.m. at the freaking Century City, the City Walk was sold out. And I got to a point where I was like, everyone's talking about this movie. I can't take this anymore. I have to go see The Odyssey. And so I just saw it on a normal screen, but I will be seeing it again.
Was it empty? Was nobody in the theater?
No, it was sold out.
Really? Even
Yes.
on IMAX?
Yeah, all the screens. You throw a dart at a screen, it's sold out.
Do you feel like it deserves to be sold out for that long?
Yeah.
Okay.
This movie's incredible.
Okay.
What are you, skeptical of The Odyssey? What are you doing?
Yeah, actually, I am.
What have you heard? We're doing an Odyssey podcast.
Here's the thing. I've read The Odyssey many times just because I am a literature and history major. So they're just things that came up in my studies. And I love it. And the why now question comes up for me. And is it just an adaptation that's really cool to look at because Chris Nolan is an absolute master at writing and directing? Or does it have something new to say about why he is adapting it now?
Okay, so this is interesting. You're going to look at it from a totally different lens, especially from the adaptation lens. Like, I kind of remembered some things. I was like, I remember there's a Cyclops. Like, I couldn't remember The Odyssey. And then I revisited some things about it, and I was like, oh, they changed this, which I thought were fine. So I'm going to be very curious about your review of The Odyssey. It better not be one of these snooty, not true to the original page reviews.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that can't be the review. You're not allowed to do that. It's Homer's.
No.
It's like so old that it shouldn't be a direct adaptation. You have to adapt it in some way, modernize it, have something new to say. It's just, We'll do an
Okay.
Odyssey podcast.
I'm gonna do an Odyssey phone call with you. I don't care. I need to talk. I know it's talking to me about this movie. All right. Anyway.
All right. I have a This Week in Writing before we get into it.
This Week in Writing.
Part of what has been so stressful is that I have been in a writer's room that has a very truncated amount of time. There's only 10 days to break an entire season of television. And, for perspective, you usually get like 20 weeks.
Wait. Hang on. You have 10 days to do 20 weeks?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot to do in a very short period of time. And so what I have learned from this, the interesting thing that I think it does, because we don't have time to get in the weeds on things, which you normally do. Like by the time you are leaving to go write your episode in a 20-week room, you are, every single scene. You might even know some dialogue that's happening in that scene. It's very, very detailed. But we don't have time to do that. So what it does is it reminds you what's extremely important to get into shape for your story and how much you can just find when you get onto the page and you start writing, right? Which means for the shape, you need to know where your characters start, where your characters end, and what are the key scenes and moments or pillars that you need in between those two things in order to get them from that starting point to that ending point. And that's it. Like, that's the only shape that you need. It's really that easy, is I think the reminder. Not that developing a TV show in 10 days is easy, but if you are a skilled writer, you are able to take those pillars, understand where your character needs to go and where they start, and then you can fill in the blanks later. And that's work that you can do at home on your own. And I think that that's just so important. And we've heard so many filmmakers in interviews, etc. I think we have a recurring Robert Towne quote of the day where he talks about how a movie is like just 5 moments between characters, and then the rest of the movie is just like earning those moments. And that is no more clear than when you're having to break a season of television in 10 days.
It's kind of like Odysseus in the Odyssey. No, but I was actually just talking to somebody about outlining, and I was saying, just know your beginning, your middle, and your end. And then if you know that, you could just start filling things in. And we start to kind of talk and spitball off of that. But there's nothing more important than knowing the wants and where your character is going. You just figure it out.
Yeah, you just start there and everything else will start to fall in place. All right, our topic today comes from an article by Jason Hellerman on nofilmschool.com that Josh and I saw about 5 hacks that will supposedly make your screenplay a must finish. And as you know, Josh and I love to look at all the screenwriting advice that is out there in the world just to see what other people are telling writers to do. And then we bring it up here and we talk about it. And we talk about if those hacks or tips work in our own lives as professionals or if they don't, and why. And that's just us. It's us. If these hacks work for you in their complete form, go for it. Any tool is a great tool. But we love to sort of investigate, I think, what other writers are using as their tips and tricks and to see how we sort of activate those ideas in our own lives.
Totally. And we often will get messages and people will say, what do you think about this? Or someone will share a video on Instagram. What do you think about this article? And it is always very interesting. And I feel like a lot of the resources we used to have are not around. They're just gone, like the tracking board and some of these areas people got like screenwriting tips. So I love it. I love when people send stuff like this or when we come across things like this. And I love talking about it.
It's interesting. I was just talking with my mom. We went somewhere over the weekend. We were talking about just like my college years. And she was asking like, what got you into screenwriting? And like, how did that look like for you? Like, how did you even figure out that was a thing? And I had to like bring myself back to my college years. And I was like, how did I? Because my school did not have a program for screenwriting. So how the fuck did I learn how to do screenwriting? And I just went to Barnes and Noble and I just bought like every screenplay from everything. And because they would have a section of screenplays that you could buy as little books. And I would just buy all the ones that I knew were amazing or that I personally loved. And I would just read them to understand just like format, structure, all of that. And I essentially taught myself a huge chunk of it. And then when I went to film school for 2 years, it was more just like learning about like lighting and like how other filmmakers directed. It was sort of like icing on the cake, but like the actual foundation of screenwriting, I feel like was just a lot of self-teaching.
Yeah. On that note, my mom got me my first screenwriting book called The Screenwriter's Bible, I think. It was from Barnes and Noble in
Uh-huh.
Wisconsin. And I remember having it and just trying to like digest it and thinking like, what? Like, I don't understand.
Did she get it for you because you were so obsessed with movies? She thought, "Hey, like there's a job here. Check this out."
Well, as I've said this a million times, I would say like I want to write movies. I want to make movies. I don't know how to do this. And I didn't know the starting point. I didn't know anything at all. But it was so overwhelming, it didn't really click. It was just so much new information. But yeah, that was my first book, which I think I still have somewhere as like a relic.
I love that. I definitely have all my screenwriting books as well. We'll
Yeah.
have to share what those are for everyone. Okay, let's start with these 5 hacks that will make your screenplay a must read, apparently. Let's see if that's true. Number 1 is the element of surprise. This writer says one thing that you should think about before writing anything is that you need to have a bit of a new take on any idea. Why are you diving into this story, and what do you have to say that's different from everyone else? And then the article goes on to say that the hack for this, to figure out how to add the element of surprise into your screenplay, is to give the audience something they didn't see coming. It doesn't have to be a plot twist, it can be a tonal shift. And I'm going to bring up their example because I think it emphasizes their hack, which says in Good Will Hunting, when Robin Williams is telling a story about his wife, the story he tells is about her farting in her sleep, which kind of turns a tense scene into a really intimate kind of funny one. Josh, what do you think of this hack of the element of surprise?
When I first read this, I thought it was a little bit more of talking generally about an idea and not a scene. So I thought it was kind of like give me the same but different, concept is king or queen type idea. I don't know if I necessarily agree with this Good Will Hunting example, but I think if you're talking about a concept, which is how I took it, then yes, it's good to say like I'm doing Jurassic Park, but it's going to be in a neighborhood that just got transported somewhere else, right? And so it's like we'll call it the end of Oak Street, and it's going to feel a little more contained than Jurassic Park or whatever it is. What did you think?
I agree with you. I feel like the hack is sort of saying 2 separate things, right? It's the why now and why you aspect of creating a story idea to begin with, and then it's the actual scene work part of it is be surprising in scene work. But generally, like I like this hack. I think it's super important to upend your audience expectations. I think the first statement I also agree with. You kind of ask yourself, why are you telling this story? I've definitely turned down projects before because I didn't have anything to say in that world or with those characters, or I knew that I wasn't the right person to like really deeply understand it enough to translate that into a movie or show. But again, these are sort of 2 different things, like why you to tell this story, and then once you're in this story, how do you find a way to be surprising? Both I think are equally valid. I think being surprising is actually kind of hard for me. My brain doesn't automatically think of like the less predictable way to get into and out of a situation because I think as a writer, I am so obsessed with like getting things on a page so that they make sense and then going back and honing things later. That's generally my approach. Rather than someone who might be like a super out of the box thinker and they start with things that are out of the box and then have to do the opposite, like figure out how to make it all work afterwards. I'm the other way around. But I can usually tell if something is too easy and too unsurprising or basic. So a lot of my work in rewriting is about that. It's like either you're researching or, like, how can this person get out of this bear trap in an interesting way that we haven't seen before? I was just going through The Conjuring again for a different project to just, see the master at work in terms of horror moments. And one of the things that feels really surprising, and that movie is kind of full of different surprises in terms of what we're used to in a horror movie and then how it's kind of flipped on its head a little bit. But one that really stuck out is there's this music box, and I think it's Vera Farmiga. She like opens the music box, and there's a little mirror in a music box usually, and in it you can see a ghost. She can see a ghost, and like startled, she shuts the music box. And usually in a horror movie, like that's it. Like, that's the scare. But instead, James Wan levels up and like you close the music box and the ghost is right there. And you're like, oh fuck, like I wasn't expecting that, right? So like that Good Will Hunting is a good example of like a tonal shift you can do where two characters are at a pivotal moment. It's supposed to be a dramatic scene. And it can still be a dramatic scene, but how do you play that dramatic scene a little bit differently? Well, you have Robin Williams talk about his wife, but the story he tells is about her farting in her sleep, which I'm sure was just like him riffing because that's just who he is.
You actually bring up a perfect example with The Conjuring. The Conjuring had the clapping moment in it, right?
Mm-hmm. The clapping game.
The clapping game. And there's only so many things like jump scares, and it feels like we've seen everything. And horror films are a perfect example of if you can kind of create something a little bit different, but we know what we're already getting. We know there's going to be a jump scare. We just don't know when or how, but we know it's coming. And like that's actually a perfect example to study horror films.
Yeah. Yeah. They do a great job. So I think for me, like the writing lesson of this first one of Be Surprising is like, once you're done with your script, go back through it, do a pass where you're looking specifically at what feels expected in your script, and then isolate those moments because it can feel overwhelming to look at the whole and be like, oh no, like how do I make my script overwhelmingly more interesting? Instead, just focus on your scenes one at a time, brainstorm ideas around what other options there might be for getting out of that bear trap, right? And I think it's okay when you do this to like do a crazy ass list. Like if I like get my big sheet of paper and I'm writing down just ideas for getting out of a bear trap, I could write things that absolutely will not happen. Like she somehow melts the trap because it's so hot that the screws get loose and she's able to break out of it. Or a bear comes and like bites her leg off. Like I could do crazy shit because you're just getting everything out. And there may be some combination of the weird thing that you did and like a more grounded thing that if you combine can actually be something really creative. So that would be like my writing lesson from this number one.
I love it. Number 2, the power flip. He says, nothing creates tension like a shifting hierarchy of who is in control. A scene is most compelling when the person holding all of the cards at the beginning loses them by the end. So, how do you enter a scene with the confidence and see that slip away, or vice versa? He goes on to say the hack is start with one character in a position of dominance and watch that power migrate to something else by paying off what you set up in the scene. The example that he offers is the opening scene of Inglourious Bastards, when the colonel enters with absolute control, but the scene is a constant terrifying dance of power shifting between him and the farmer and him taking over and killing everybody.
So this one bugs me a little bit, Josh Hallman, because it's so specific. Like this power flip idea is like great advice if your story is about power dynamics. But what if my story is about grief and loss and who is dominance in a scene has nothing to do with anything that this story is about? So to me, it's kind of it's sort of a weird one. And also kind of like a weird way to word this like hack. Because the hack, in my opinion, is have scenes that are dynamic between characters. Just have something going on with your characters in a given scene. Meaning, if my story is about grief and loss, and my story, let's say, features a dad and his son, and the person they lost is their mother, then the scene that you write at the dinner table between dad and the son shouldn't be, man, we are both so sad. Aren't we so sad together? Right? It should have something to say about grief, right? The dinner scene should have a chance to do something that's interesting and justifies why we're watching a movie about it, right? Maybe the dad hated the mom and the son loved her. And so now they're grieving, but in very different ways. And I think human beings rarely say what's actually going on in their head. So maybe they start an argument over the peas, which is really an argument about the dead mom, but it starts because of the peas, right? The peas are cold. Well, dad says they finished first, so they're cold. And the kid says, but mom always kept them warm in the oven. And the dad's like, well, I'm not mom. And he's like, I wish you were. And now we're fighting. And that's not necessarily power flipping, but it is creating dynamism in a scene so that you're wondering, how is this going to go? Like, is the son going to blow up at dad? Is the dad going to blow up? Is the dad going to calm things down? You just start to have questions, and that's what engages you. I think, too, of like the scene in Jaws where Brody, right, is it's been a while. He's sitting at the dinner table, and the scene with the kid, his son, like the scene as written was just like he just eats dinner, right? But the scene becomes so much more dynamic because of some of the direction, some of the things they found on the day leading up to it, etc., that just made the scene more than just we're having dinner with the family and we're now investigating how he is as a father, what it's like to be him torn away from a family with such a young kid, and how the kid is looking up to his dad and mimicking him. Like there's so much dynamism in the scene when it's just about dinner, right? That to me is what the hack is. The power flipping and like switching who has power in a scene is maybe one way to look at it, depending on if your scene requires that. But this being like the hack as a number two feels odd to me.
I agree with everything you just said.
Okay.
Number 3,
Number three.
the silent scene. Be confident in your abilities as a writer. Dialogue is often used as a crutch. Beginners use it to explain everything. Pros use it as a last resort. It says the hack. Try writing a scene with zero dialogue. When you strip away words, you are forced to rely on visuals, behavior, and subtext. And then they give Wall-E as an example. Like the first act basically is no dialogue whatsoever.
I love this one.
Yeah?
I don't think you should have a silent scene just for the sake of having a silent scene, and that's like you being an auteur. But
Yeah.
being able to think about dialogue as not a crutch, I think is really key for me.
Here's what I like about it. I think what it's saying, at least the way I read it, is that it is use your characters to show what their issues are rather than just telling everybody what their issues are and what their life is like and what they're doing and how they interact with certain things or certain people or how a look affects, their mood or something to that extent. I feel like it's the show don't tell type idea, but that's what I think's effective. I don't think like pure silence is gonna like do more than what dialogue could do.
Yeah, and I don't think trying to find a silent scene is going to make your script a must read. I think that's odd. If anything, as we've talked a lot about in terms of readers at studios or producers, they can like sometimes flip through stuff to just get to dialogue. And if you have a scene that's all action description, they're like, "Oh my god, where's the dialogue?" So not that you should write to that exact producer, but I think what I love about this hack to make your script a must read is simply about dialogue and understanding how to use your dialogue. I'm definitely in the camp that newer writers tend to use dialogue as a crutch, and even pros do all the time, just because it's much easier to write a line of dialogue that tells us something than to figure out how to show something. For example, actually, this came up in my own writing life for a TV show that I was developing. In one of the episodes, we were going to go into a town that is caught in the middle of a war. And we knew we needed to tag that war in the episode. So we knew we needed to see refugees, for example, to just show that the war was happening off screen somewhere. And one of the pitches from one of the writers was that our main character goes to a refugee camp and has a whole conversation there with someone about the war and about these refugees that we're seeing here. But for me, like the episode was actually more about kind of the awe of entering this new town that felt like a safe place from the war, the overwhelming feeling of what it means to enter a war-torn town, which to me feels propulsive, it feels overwhelming. And there are a lot of people, some of which are, a guy missing a leg, a couple orphans who are begging for scraps. We see destruction, etc. So my note to the writer was, hey, can we get that idea of the refugee camp that you're talking about without having to go to a new location and have a conversation about it? What can we get across visually that tells us this is a town with refugees because there's a war-torn area around it? And what we boiled it down to was we changed it from a complete other scene with dialogue about it to our main character just like as they approach this town, they end up in a line of other refugees, and just by them witnessing, the guy with one leg, etc., we get a sense of the war without ever having to talk about it once. So that is where you can look at your scenes, see where just like examine your dialogue in a scene and think, okay, would real people actually say this to one another? Or are you just writing dialogue that you feel like you need in order to get through the scene? And if it's the latter, change it. Change it. And then also isolate your scenes and look at what can you take out. That can be a really helpful lesson as well. And we're going to do an episode about the anatomy of a scene because a listener asked us to do an episode about that, which I think we'll go more in depth into this idea when we do that. But when you're looking at a scene, for example, like the stupid example is I go into a shop and I say, "Hey, Janie," who's works at the shop, like, "Hey, Janie, how are you this morning? Do you have any coffee in?" And do I have to start the scene right there? Do I have to start the scene of like the character even coming in? Can I cut into the scene in a different way where we're already in and he's like shaking an empty can of coffee and be like, "Whoa, you didn't fill up the coffee." Like, what is that scene that just feels more realistic and has more propulsiveness than kind of soup to nuts? And I think that's what I tend to see in a lot of newer writers is that their dialogue is soup to nuts. I walk in, da 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 da, and then I say goodbye. Like, you don't need all of that.
Yeah.
What is your take on dialogue and silence in movies? Because you write very propulsive action movies.
Yeah, you don't want to be too on the nose. You want to start late in a scene. I agree with everything you said, but oftentimes there's a lot of dialogue. Thank you for saying propulsive, by the way, and not boring.
It's not. It never is. All right. Number 4, the scene thief. Your story has a lot of characters in it who may only be in there for one scene, says this article. How can you maximize those characters and their voices in order to steal the spotlight? Yes, the protagonist is the heart of your story, but they shouldn't own every single moment. This writer goes on to say the hack is let a supporting character take the wheel. And a pro example would be The Dark Knight, where he says, while Batman is the lead, the Joker and Harvey Dent frequently steal scenes, making the world feel expansive and dangerous. And then his arc gets paid off in the end because of those things.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like writing rich roles for actors and making them unique, which I think is very important. You have to have certain quirks and memorable characters. Yeah, something that you just remember each character by in each scene.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's the guy who had, you know, he repeated himself multiple times and it was a quirk that turned out to be pretty funny. And then it's a character thing that affects the main character or whatever it may be. Just write good characters.
Yeah. I guess that's the hack, but they're breaking it down to remember about sporting characters. Yeah, I sort of like paused at this one as well because just honestly, I didn't know this was a serious problem. And you and I have read a lot of screenplays. But of course, I agree. Like, your supporting characters absolutely have to feel interesting and dynamic, and they do. He's right. Like, they do make the world feel bigger when they are very well drawn. And in terms of what this article is about, which is like how to make your screenplay a must read, if only your hero is well crafted and all the supporting characters around them are just like serving their story but are just blank slates, then that's very boring and it just makes your screenplay boring and it makes it unrealistic. And so yeah, of course people are going to stop reading because your script does not have good characters.
Yeah, no, it's very important. And something you just said, like making the world feel bigger. I think it's always very entertaining when you either read or see a character who is in their own world, on their own path, in their own story, and we just happen to be checking in on them when the protagonist finds that character. I think it's very important to make sure your secondary characters are rich and alive.
Yeah. And it's interesting that he gave the example of The Dark Knight because I do feel like both, of course, the Joker because he's the antagonist, but Harvey Dent feels like a character that in lesser hands could have been sort of kicked to the side and just been sort of a nothing type of character. Obviously becomes Two-Face, so like the part of the point of the movie is to arc him to become that. So naturally he should have more of a role because there's going to be this bigger arc for him. But also Harvey Dent's point of view on the world is different than Bruce Wayne's point of view on the world. And they are both kind of fighting over the same girl. So that's why Batman cares about Harvey Dent's point of view in the world, because that point of view is stealing his girl, right? And so there is something interesting to that movie as an example of this, because giving Harvey Dent his own character with his own wants, desires, again, point of view on the world, and having that butt up against your hero makes that story so much richer. And it also really affects your hero. And just like Josh is saying, most of the time in kind of like less adept hands, supporting characters just serve your hero. and they don't challenge them necessarily unless they're the antagonist. They don't like challenge that your hero's point of view, and it's important to build really, really rich side characters. And I'm certainly guilty of it too, because sometimes you just need them to talk to a shop owner, which is fine. A shop owner is fine, but if it's like a recurring supporting character in the movie or the show, give them meat to chew on.
I would say you're actually really good at this.
Really?
Just thinking about your characters. Yeah, I think so.
Thank you.
Character business, number 5. In real life, people rarely sit perfectly still and talk. They're cooking, fixing a bike, folding laundry. This is called character business. So the hack that he offers is give your characters something to do with their hands. Show them performing a mundane task to tell the reader more about their internal state. As an example, in Little Children, a dad plays with a train with his son. We see the dad's train being overpowered by the little boy and his annoyance that the little boy doesn't take him seriously. What do you think about character business, Tasha?
I love this hack. I have no notes.
No notes. I was actually just thinking I can't remember what I watched, but you know when a chef has a knife and they're getting angry and they're on a cutting board and they're like, someone's telling that you're telling me something and I'm the chef and I'm getting worked up and it's like you just chopping. I feel like that's like a character business moment. And then you just slam the knife in or something like that.
100%.
No, I love this as well. Anytime you can give a character something to do and they're just playing with something, I think is gold.
I hate nothing more than a scene where two characters are just talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
I hate it so much. Not that you should go overboard and have them have something, because that becomes, then it's just a writing a writing hack you're doing every scene. But for the most part, I try to have characters, even if it's just walking, just have them do something besides sitting in a room and talking. Unless, of course, that's the point of the scene. But then that's a point, right? Like in other scenes, they're probably eating dinner and walking around and chefing. But then there's a scene where it's quiet and they're just together in a room talking. And that becomes a big deal now because in the rest of the movie, they're doing normal human things.
Yeah. I just watched The Sheep Detective.
Oh.
Or Sheep Detectives.
Yes, Joshua.
I can't believe I slept on this. It was fantastic.
So good.
But this is kind of inherent to murder mysteries where there's always someone just explaining something or I was here and this is what happened. And usually there's flashbacks or cutaways or whatever it may be. There are multiple moments in that with the Nicholas Braun character where he's, looking at someone a certain way or playing with like fiddling or fumbling papers or whatever it is. And I think that's a really good example of like giving character business. A great movie, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and your character business can tell story as well. It is another tool in the tool chest. And something we are going to start doing more of in our Patreon Q&As is isolating these little hacks, basically, of like how is a really great filmmaker and writer executing character in a really interesting way, and what tools do they have at their disposal besides just dialogue, besides just like what we consider the writing of it, to tell the story about that character. And one of them is character business and what your character is doing. I think all of your characters, for example, should stand differently. They should maybe one of them fiddles with something and it's a nervous tick. You have Brad Pitt in Ocean's 11 always eating. There are things that you can do with characters that tell story besides just what they say. I love it.
I love it too.
Overall, these are pretty good hacks.
It's good things to remember.
Act 2 approved.
You just have to write a good script.
Yeah, just be good. That is what's tricky behind all of these. It's like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, dialogue, got it. Okay, yeah, but basically it's just like, oh, be a good writer.
Yeah. Do you have a beginning, a middle, and an end?
So helpful. That's the thing I've always hated about screenwriting books is, okay, yeah, that sounds great. God, it sounds so easy when The Dark Knight does it. I could do that.
Yeah. It's silly.
All right. Quote of the day.
Take us home.
That is part of the beauty of all literature. You discover that your longings are universal longings, that you're not lonely and isolated from anyone. You belong. F. Scott Fitzgerald. Please remember to rate and subscribe. Follow us at ActTwoWriters for more awesome writing stuff. You can follow me, Tasha, at Story Thursday on Instagram.
And I am Josh Hallman on Instagram.
And as always, the Act 2 podcast is a production of Act 2, a network and support group for the everyday working screenwriter. This episode was edited by Paul Lundquist.